Good morning and welcome to day 7 of our budget hearings. We are glad to be joined today by our Attorney General, Dave Sunday, who you'll hear from soon. Before we begin, Chairman Struzzi, would you like to have any opening remarks?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Harris, Attorney General Sunday, and your team. Thank you for being here. Dave, congratulations. It's good to see you in this role. Before we begin, I want to, as I have been doing, kind of lay out for people who are listening and the people who are here what the budget numbers we're talking about are in front of us for the Attorney General's office. So in the fiscal year 24-25 budget, the Attorney General's office was allocated roughly about $144 million. In the governor's proposed budget, he is allocating $156.5 million. So I think it's important people understand the context of the numbers and what we're talking about related to the questions that will be asked this morning. So I know we have a very long day today, and so we will move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. General Sunday, would you like to introduce the folks who are at the table with you?
Yes, absolutely. So to my right is my Chief of Staff, Kyle King. To my left is the First Deputy Attorney General, Jim Donahue, and to his left is the Executive Deputy Attorney General for the Criminal Division, Kirsten Hine.
Thank you. In the middle of the table is our timer. Every member will have 5 minutes to ask questions. When the member begins, the light will turn green. When there's 30 seconds left, the light will turn yellow. We would ask that our members try to refrain from asking another question at yellow. Inevitably, someone will, but we ask that you refrain from asking another question when the light turns yellow. And when the light turns red, the time has concluded. And General and all the deputies would ask that you would begin to conclude your statements when the light turns red. I would like to remind members that today's hearing and this afternoon's hearings are a little bit different. General Sunday is a duly elected row officer of this Commonwealth. Elected by the citizens of this Commonwealth, and therefore will be respected as a duly elected official of this Commonwealth. General, would you and your team stand so we can swear you in and get started? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You all may be seated. General, you may begin.
Good morning. If it's okay, before we start, I'd like to ask that we have a moment of silence for Officer Andrew Duarte, who is a police officer in York County, where I'm from, and who was killed this past weekend.
All those that are able, please rise as a sign of respect for our fallen officer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chairman Harris, Republican Chair Struzzi, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you here today. It's an honor to serve as Pennsylvania's Attorney General, and I appreciate this vital role this committee plays in ensuring that our office has the resources needed to carry out its mission. I am deeply grateful for the support that the legislature and the governor have provided to this office over the many, many years, and for the warm welcome that I have received since my swearing in just 1 month ago. While I may not yet have the benefit of years of institutional knowledge, I have spent this time working hard to understand the scope of our responsibilities, to assess ongoing challenges and identify opportunities to strengthen the office of Attorney General. My approach is not to dwell on what I haven't yet had time to do, but to focus on the work ahead and how we can best serve the people of Pennsylvania. My priorities are clear: protecting public safety, ensuring accountability, and using taxpayer dollars efficiently. I recognize that this office has an obligation to uphold the law fairly and effectively, and I take that responsibility seriously. I also recognize that every budget decision we make must be guided by impact and efficiency. The work of this office touches every community in the Commonwealth, whether it's prosecuting violent crime, fighting consumer fraud, addressing the opioid crisis, or protecting seniors from scams. This budget process is an opportunity to ensure that we have the tools necessary to meet these challenges head-on. The budget outlined in this request ensures the Office of Attorney General remains on solid footing while securing the necessary resources to fulfill our mission, meet our statutory responsibilities, and address key priorities, including combating illegal guns and the fentanyl and opioid epidemic, keeping our communities safe from child predators, protecting Pennsylvanians from scams, targeting public corruption, representing Commonwealth agencies, and collecting revenue for the Commonwealth, because our communities, if they're not safe, nothing else matters. I look forward to working with this committee and my colleagues across government to strengthen public safety, support law enforcement, and ensure that the Office of Attorney General remains trusted and effective advocate for Pennsylvanians. Thank you, and I look forward to working with every single one of you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General. We're going to start with Representative Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. General Sunday, I come from Lawrence County, one of the most drug-trafficked counties in the state, unfortunately. So I'm particularly interested that the governor proposed an increase of $2.398 million in drug law enforcement. Can you describe some of the current programs available within the line item?
I can. Thank you very much for that question. To begin with, it is absolutely crucial that in Pennsylvania, we do everything we can to fight addiction and to fight that through the lens of interdiction, but also through the lens of treatment and everything that comes with that, which I certainly could talk about for a long time. With regard to, in particular, the region where you live, the Attorney General's office has a strike team, and the strike team goes around throughout the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as needed. As a former DA, I worked with them regularly, and so what would happen is you may have an increase in drug trafficking, and you can reach out to the Attorney General's office, and we would partner with your local authorities to increase the forces available, essentially, to do what they can to identify, arrest, and prosecute drug traffickers. And that's really important because, again, you know, when you look around the Commonwealth and you have all these different district attorneys and different law enforcement officers, a lot of the DA's offices are currently understaffed, like tremendously understaffed. And so the work that we can provide through our strike team is something that can be done to help you in particular. In addition to that, we have our drug strike force that works in, well, actually, let's take a step back there. So we have three things we're part of. Number one, local drug task forces, okay, which are DA-run drug task forces. The second, where we help them and we work with them. Number two, our Attorney General-run drug task forces. Number third, our strike teams that go around throughout the state, like we talked about earlier. Those are three of the main ways that we are combating the flow of drugs.
And I'm aware of that, and we truly appreciate your support. I know that our DA, Lamakusa, does an awesome job in our community. Any future programs that you're considering adding to this line item?
Well, to this specific line item, so as I mentioned in my introduction, that I'm at the point now where I am really diving into the office. And, you know, and to that point, what I don't want to do is just come up with random ideas of things without having the benefit of spending time working through the office and physically seeing what's happening and seeing the outcomes. But what I can say is, with regard to that line item, I think it's close to 80% of that will be for salary and benefits. So around 80% of that will be for salary and benefits. I will say very simply that one of the takeaways is that the work that's done by the drug task forces is a type of work where if you have one more person, that person can do so much more work. Every person you add, because it's a type of work it is that there is a value added. There is a value added to society. And I just want to state that all of this work that's done arresting these individuals is also done hand in hand with the LETI program, which is something I'm not sure if I'll get to discuss today, the Law Enforcement Treatment Initiative.
Okay. I truly appreciate that. But while we're talking about the DA, because I am concerned about this, your submitted budget shows that the criminal justice enhancement account, which receives a $2.50 fee on court filings, except traffic citations, shows that without additional revenue in 2025-26, you'll only be able to make a partial payment until additional revenue is received. This account is used to fund the reimbursement of counties for 65% of the cost of a full-time district attorney. So can you explain the fiscal impact this would have on county district attorneys?
So the way it works is that, and I'm sure everyone here knows this, but the statute ties the county district attorney's salary to $1,000 less than the county judge's salary. And so whenever the county judge's salary goes up, automatically the county DA's salary travels with it. Do I have to stop when that turns red?
No, you're good.
It's my first one, guys. Come on. You know?
Wait. So
It's my first one.
We just asked that when you see the red, you.
I'd be thoughtful and considerate.
Thank you.
All right. And so to that point, very simply, as the judicial salaries increase by statute, they will. The DAs go with it. The way it works is that obviously the county pays their salary, and then that's reimbursed from, I guess it would be a pass-through through the Attorney General's office. And so I guess the question becomes, what would happen if they stopped being reimbursed? And I think that's something that we would have to hopefully never be in a position where that would happen. And so that's the rationale behind that.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Young.
Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us on today. 2 questions. Thank you, Jim, for helping us in Delaware County with the Crozier healthcare systems. We are so excited that there could potentially be a buyer in place for the healthcare system. But my question is, because it's another for-profit system, Insight Health Systems, can you let us know if there are any concerns at all? And what is your office doing to ensure that what has happened with the last problem with Crozier does not repeat itself?
Well, I would like to begin with, and thank you for that question. I appreciate it tremendously. I am overwhelmingly understanding of the issue facing Pennsylvanians with access to health care, be it rural or urban. I understand the impact of everything from pregnancy, places where people can go with regard to pregnancies. I understand it with regard to the behavioral health care, which is unbelievably important, where we don't have access to behavioral health care. Since I stepped foot in the office, this topic literally has permeated the office every single day since I've been there. And so I just want you to know that moving forward, I'm going to work with everyone to identify ways that we can do what we can so that things like this don't happen in the future. With regard to this specific instance, I do happen to have an expert in my office who's sitting to my left, and I'm going to ask him to give you an update.
So with regard to Insight, they were mentioned in a bankruptcy court filing in Texas. They are not actually a...
Jim, can you pull that mic a little closer to you so we can hear you?
Sure.
Thank you.
With regard to Insight, they were mentioned in a bankruptcy court filing in Texas. They are not actually in consideration as a potential buyer for the Crozier system. Our goal all along, since we started working on the Crozier health system issues over 2 years ago, was to transition Crozier from its existing for-profit owner into a nonprofit owner or owners, meaning that maybe one non-profit system would take it over, or it would be divided up among a number of very strong nonprofit systems in southeastern Pennsylvania and the surrounding areas. So that's sort of the update there. There's a receiver in place, and they're working hard to create a plan that hopefully will work.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I heard you. Did you say that you are still working on finding a potential buyer, or
Yes, we are still working on a potential buyer, and Insight is not going to be it.
Insight is
Out.
out. Insight is out. Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood that. Okay, thank you for that. As we are recognizing that healthcare is a human right, I want to shift my questions over to human trafficking. So I appreciate the appropriations for the enforcement and prevention of human trafficking right here in the Commonwealth. That's an area in which some of my colleagues with bipartisan support, we are working on making sure that we highlight that in legislation. Can you, and you have been a great resource, your office have been a great resource in informing us as legislators and crafting that. My question is really around what is the plan of implementation? I know that when we first had those preliminary conversations, Reps Khan, Nelson, and Ledbetter, myself, we in our offices and your team, there was a lot of acknowledgement and need for the work, but we weren't really clear on what that direction is ultimately going to look like in terms of implementing. I just wanted to add also, in my particular county, part of that I serve is in the 185th. I represent Philadelphia and Delaware County, and in Delaware County is the airport area and hotel hub, and so as you can imagine, we're greatly concerned, and so we would love to know what that looks like real time.
I appreciate that question, and just to start with, human trafficking is an unbelievably horrendous scourge. It's something that I saw as a district attorney. It's something that as I campaigned throughout Pennsylvania, I heard it from everywhere I went. And especially with the increase in fentanyl usage, human trafficking comes hand in hand with other crimes. And when we look at the amount of fentanyl that has permeated society, when we look at, in particular, increases in other areas, which the legislature has been so kind to provide us with resources for, such as, for example, organized retail theft. You know, there's an intersection between organized retail theft and human trafficking. There's an intersection, going back to the question that was asked earlier, about the drug work that we do. Most of these cases are identified through victims in the course of drug investigations. And so all of this work that everybody's doing collaborates to achieve that. I want you to know that since this section was launched in 2024, we have 65 active human trafficking cases, 14 labor trafficking cases, 51 sex trafficking cases. There's been 26 referrals, 31 arrests, and 6 grand jury presentments. As of January, the Office of Attorney General secured a multi-million-dollar grant from the Howard Buffett Foundation to be used for Operation PA Strike and initiative to educate the public on human trafficking and investigate traffickers. And so I just want to say, in respect for the red button in front of me as well, that the education component is crucial, absolutely crucial. Absolutely. I mean, there are young men and women who don't even realize they're being trafficked. So anything we can do to continue getting the word out. And the other part I want to say is we can't ever forget the victims in this case. And we have to do what we can to utilize our resources to get the bad guys that are making money off this and to help the victims who've been trafficked.
Facts. I appreciate that. I look forward to continued work with your office. Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Mustela.
Thank you, Chairman Harris. And General Sunday, welcome. Congratulations as well. According to your office's fiscal year 2025-2026 budget request, the Drug Strike Force charged 522 defendants with drug and drug-related offenses in 2024. Can you tell us what the top 3 illegal drugs that were most dealt with during these drug-related offenses?
So based on my understanding in preparation for today, fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine. I just want to clarify, is that correct? Yes. So fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine. You know, what we're seeing, obviously, and especially in the areas where the strike force is working, they're high trafficking areas. And so when you look at the amount of fentanyl that's being trafficked, which is unbelievably scary, I know everyone in here knows how deadly it is. You know, when you stop one source or you stop one logistics system, nature abhors a vacuum, and you're going to see traffickers use other things. So we're seeing a lot of methamphetamine. We're seeing cocaine being trafficked as well. You have cocaine that has fentanyl mixed into it. You have, meth that's being sold along with fentanyl. And so those would be the main drugs that are being interdicted by the Attorney General's office. And my hope is that those numbers will continue to go up.
Oh, the charges will go, okay.
Yes.
And as far as the drug strike force, the complement that you have, how many more officers, agents do you think you're going to need? Because I understand you were authorized for so many, and whereabouts do you think you'll?
So in this budget, we did not ask for additional agents or attorneys to do the strike force work. That being said, the reality is that when you look across Pennsylvania, the need is absolutely there. And what we have discovered is everywhere we go, where we start having an impact, we realize there's so much work to be done.
Mm-hmm. And do you know the percentage of those drug-related offenses were related to the use of non-medically prescribed marijuana?
So my understanding is that it's in the realm of 5%. And I don't have those specific numbers sitting in front of me.
And well, when I was asking about the complement, you were talking about how many more attorneys you need. I was talking about agents with boots on the ground.
Right.
Is that what you were
Yes,
talking about as well? I'm sorry.
Right. We did not request additional funding for additional agents.
Oh, you did not?
No,
okay.
the funding.
So you think you're okay with where you are?
Well, I mean, the reality is, based on what I think is important as an attorney general, we absolutely could use more agents. And I want to say something very important about that. When you talk about these agents for drug trafficking, these are the same agents that oftentimes come into contact with the victims of human trafficking. They're the same agents that come into contact because most of these human trafficking victims are unfortunately in places where the drug strike force officers find themselves through the course of investigations. And so that is one of the ways that we identify victims that are trafficked. You keep walking through the different issues that we're facing with illegal gun trafficking and illegal gun violence. Again, these are officers that are in those same places that help remove illegal guns off the street to the tune of hundreds a year. And so very simply, when we look at this through the lens of public safety, then of course we would need additional people to do the job.
That's great. All right, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, General. It's appropriate and that you've mentioned human trafficking, and Rep. Young started us in that direction. You got the red light last time, so let's you can play that out a little bit. The first part of this, in my mind, is a little bit legislative. Representative Young has a bill that's associated with the hotel industry and protecting them a little bit. And I have a bill that's a little separate around unlicensed massage businesses. And so I'd ask maybe if you can take a look at those and give us some feedback. But the distinction is, in one case, the business entity is part of the victim and being taken advantage of. And in the other case, the business entity is actually perpetrating the issue of human trafficking. And I know in my district, we've been playing whack-a-mole with massage businesses. They open up, there's car traffic at 3 in the morning, which isn't typically when a licensed therapist is working. And we close that business with local law enforcement. It pops up literally 2 blocks away within the next month. So if you could talk a little bit about, continue that discussion on human trafficking. You mentioned it's heinous. It's an $11 billion industry in the United States. The Keystone State is right in the middle of that.
It's horrific, and my heart is lightened by the fact that even though it's such a difficult topic, that people are really concerned about it. And I want to say a couple things. Number one, right before I became the Attorney General, we finished up a huge case that I worked on where it was exactly what you're saying, 4 or 5 different parlors. They were tied together from different, from the same person in another state. And every single trafficked person in there, they were all from China. And so we brought in, we had to bring in the proper translators to speak with them, all the victim services. We brought in nonprofits. And we did everything we could to identify a way to help get them into treatment or get them into safety. Right. And at the end of the day, not one of them took us up on it. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, fear of reprisal, fear of a lot of things. But the takeaway from it was how prevalent they were. I mean, human trafficking victims are identified through a lot of different ways. We're talking about the brick and mortar way that police definitely could get into. So long story short, I would love to see your bill. But the other part is, with the onset of artificial intelligence, with the advancements in technology, I mean, my son's 10, and he's like 15 times smarter than I am. And so the reality is they're getting to our children through gaming systems, through any time a child can even get on the internet. There are predators out there that ultimately are tied into victim trafficking that can get to them. And so I think that we have to do what we can to identify ways to root out the people that are making money off of this. We have to root them out from the ground, the people that are making money off of this, and they have to suffer.
Yeah, well, I certainly would agree with that. And just for the record, both of these bills are co-sponsored in bipartisan fashion. So obviously this is an issue we all care about, rural, urban, suburban. And strangely, I'm in a suburban area. And
Right.
to see that scenario is startling, right? We realize it's embedded there. The last thing you've said a couple of times, maybe I'll just ask you to repeat, making that distinction between the victims and the perpetrators.
That's one of the hardest parts with law enforcement is, for decades and decades, police officers viewed individuals oftentimes as prostitutes that now, under the law, would be victims of human trafficking. I mean, and when we think about human trafficking, some people think of the movies they've seen, but the reality is, and actually we brought in Shay Rhodes from Villanova Law School to come in and do a training in my DA's office on this issue. And a lot of trafficked individuals are trafficked because of their addiction to a drug, and through that addiction, their control by a drug dealer. Right. And so, to that point, we have to educate law enforcement officers throughout Pennsylvania so that they understand what it means to be trafficked. They can see the signs of it. They know who to call when they identify someone that's trafficked, and to help get those people into treatment. I mean, you'll probably hear a repetitive theme today when we talk about these issues with me, where I go back to treatment. The data is overwhelming when you get individuals into drug treatment, behavioral health treatment, whatever it might be, that we are making our community safer. We're decreasing the likelihood of them being re-victimized. We're saving taxpayer dollars, keeping families together.
And I think the timing is perfect, and the legislature should be poised to work with you on that.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Flood.
Thank you, Chairman. General Sunday, welcome. Welcome to your team. As a parent, we would all like to believe that we're sending our children to school and they're in a protective learning environment. And we know that in today's day and age, that's just not the situation. Our students are dealing with bullying, cyberbullying, youth depression is skyrocketing. And I think that it's paramount that we are being vigilant to what our students are going through, as well as, making sure that we are providing resources to protect not only the students, but our schools. And this is an issue that I often hear about in my district, which is the 138th district in Northampton County. I wanted to ask you a few questions regarding school safety. The Office of the Attorney General's School Safety Line, which is the Safe to Say Something program, was established in 2018, which provides students, educators, administrators with ways to recognize signs and signals of individuals who may be at risk of hurting themselves or others, and it operates as an anonymous reporting app, website, or crisis hotline. The most recent data from the 2023-24 school year confirmed that they've handled over 34,000 tips. As school safety is not only a top national priority, but a priority that I believe that that the state needs to take as serious as possible. Can you please tell the committee how crisis center analysts are trained to triage these tips, and who does that work in your office?
So the first part of that answer, and I want to add to some of the information that you just gave, I think it's important. To start with, in looking at the tips, and you highlighted the stats for this year, I want to say 12% of those tips were designated as life safety matters. So 12% of the 34,000 were designated as life safety matters. And the top categories that fall within that were bullying and cyberbullying, drug distribution, possession, suicide ideation, and inappropriate language, behavior, and gestures. And so, to your point, I want to reemphasize how unbelievably serious this is and how great this initiative is. Thank you to the legislature for supporting it and for embracing it. And to that point, how the actual work is done within the Safe to Say program itself, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to defer to one of my colleagues that may have some more information on that.
Hi.
Hi.
So the section is run by an agent, Brittany Klein, she's the director of Safe to Say, and then there are a group of agents and analysts that take the tips. They are all trained in dealing with people in crisis, keeping in mind that a lot of these tips they're not phone calls, they're going to come in electronically, and then the agents or analysts are going to try to engage with whoever is sending the tip in. Brittany, for example, is also works in our child predator section, so she has a lot of experience dealing with child safety, and that's why she was selected to hold that position. And the other people that work there as well were selected based on their interest or experience in dealing with these types of situations.
Are you aware of how many tips you may have handled so far this current school year?
I'm not, but I could get you that information.
That would be great. The governor proposes, General Sunday, the governor's proposes a $93,000 increase for the school safety line to maintain the current program and complement. The proposal then includes a $69,000 or a 2.6% increase for fiscal year 26-27. Is your office currently aware of the need for future increases to the school safety line item?
I would say that based on the information that I have reviewed for today, I would say that that information indicates that that answer is yes. And the reason for that is because when we have to take it in conjunction with the increases that are core causes in a lot of ways of these ultimate phone calls that are made. When you look at juvenile mental health, that is just a tremendous challenge that we have to face. When you look at the increase of cyberbullying, through AI, through social media, through all the different mechanisms that now exist to the point where there's like new ones almost by the day. I would say that the answer to that is yes. And because that initiative can save lives, I think that it's, I would say yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Kincaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Sunday, I think that we would be remiss in talking about the budget if we did not talk about the funding that's coming from the federal level or the lack thereof, and your office's response to that. I represent Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania, and we have already survived the collapse of a keystone industry and rebuilt. So when a lot of our economy is based in biomedical research and the federal government then endangers that as well, this becomes a problem. Allegheny County stood to individually, just the county government of Allegheny County stood to lose $350 million as a result of the federal freeze. In neither of those instances did your office take any action to join a lawsuit to stop that. And I'm wondering if you can explain why.
Sure. So to begin with, first of all, I cannot tell you again how unbelievably important that NIH funding is, and in particular, the indirect costs of which I believe the executive order was addressing. I know how important it is for the community. As soon as that happened, I immediately got on the phone, and I had calls with UPMC, with Carnegie Mellon, with stakeholders in the community. I immediately got on the phone and reached out to both Senators McCormick and Fetterman. I reached out to congressional delegation. We set up calls, and the reason for that is this. What I've discovered through the course of my life as a lawyer is that oftentimes a knee-jerk reaction in filing a lawsuit doesn't always provide the best long-term outcome. In my experience, what has a lot of times provided the best long-term outcome, at least in the beginning, is to negotiate, is to talk, it's to explain, and to make sure that there's a situation where people understand the impact of what you're speaking to, which I agree with. And so I
appreciate that. However, in the instances where lawsuits were filed, an injunction was quickly issued and the frozen money was returned or was unfrozen. And so I'm wondering, obviously Pennsylvania has the Commonwealth Attorneys Act. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about a little bit about the delegation process that happens under the Commonwealth Attorneys Act.
Absolutely. So under the Commonwealth Attorneys Act, and I actually have that in front of me, the applicable section here that I think is important for people to understand very simply is this. And just before I read the section, the analogy for a lot of people to understand, because most people don't even understand that the AG's office represents all the Commonwealth agencies whenever they're sued, and that the AG's office, and that's every single one, and independent agencies, and we represent the state government when they're sued for tort actions, everything. And so the way that's set up is there are circumstances where, for example, a client wants to move forward on something and the attorney, for whatever reason, may not be ready to do that yet. The law builds in, just like any other client in the world, their ability to go to a different lawyer and say, I want to move forward with this. And that's what this act does. So very simply, the governor, he can make a request for a delegation. And if the attorney general does not grant the request, the governor may authorize general counsel to intervene in the litigation. And this intervention is a matter of right. And so it's instantaneous, it's a matter of right, and this is something that, it's interesting because there are many circumstances that exist all throughout our interactions together as an AG and a governor where this is a constant flow, because there are things where there's areas of expertise where he may have 100 more lawyers that understand it.
So for clarity, your office issued a statement saying that you did not delegate to the governor when he filed his lawsuit, but what you're saying is that he had the ability to file the lawsuit as of right?
Yes.
Okay. And then quickly, you said you were committed to stop the incursion of illegal guns, and I'm wondering if you and your office support efforts to end straw man purchases by closing the gun show loophole and by requiring the reporting of lost and stolen firearms.
So I think to begin with, it is critical that we do everything we can to stop straw purchasers. I mean, this office, the Attorney General's office, and as a DA, we work with the AG's office on these issues.
So I'm out of time, and I'm wondering if you could just give me a yes or no.
I'm sorry. I would be willing to work with the legislature on any issue that makes our community safer. And so I'd be more than happy to sit down.
Can we take that as a yes, then?
Let's let the general answer the question.
Without seeing any legislation, and I don't want to ever say yes or no because I've done that before, without looking at it, I would be more than happy to sit down and talk to anyone about any legislation that pertains to public safety.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Barton.
Thank you, Chairman Harris, and welcome General Sunday and your team. General Sunday, I serve the 124th Legislative District, which is southern Schuylkill County and northern Berks County. And Interstate 78 runs right through the middle of it. I-78, as I'm sure you know, runs from I-81 to New Jersey and into New York City and is an absolute throughway for human trafficking. And to follow up on my dear friend and the good lady from Delaware County and Philadelphia County, the Office of Attorney General launched a human trafficking section to address statewide efforts to effectively investigate and prosecute human trafficking cases and to provide education and outreach efforts on this issue. And I know you haven't been on this job that long, but I also know that you're not new to law enforcement or prosecuting. And I also want to commend you for your being a true warrior in the fight to end human trafficking. We thank you for that. But it's my understanding that, and it was brought up just earlier, that your office secured a multi-million-dollar grant. I didn't know what the exact number was, to be used for Operation PA Strike. It was mentioned a little bit earlier. An initiative to educate and educate the public on human trafficking and the investigation of traffickers. And this grant is also supposed to be used over the next 5 years, right? To expand the scope of and focus on labor human trafficking organizations. This is relatively new line. So can you update us on just how it's operating?
So with regard to that grant, that's a one-time grant. That's a one-time grant for, I think, $10 million.
It's $10 million.
To be used for over the course of 5 years. My understanding is, and again, this is based on my preparation for today and speaking to my staff, is that that's not a recurring grant. And so, you know, as always, you're happy for the money, but at the same time, for future planning, that can make things a little tricky.
I understand. Well, let me ask you this, as it relates to our budget, will any of the federal dollars be eligible to cover the cost of the current program to offset state spending? Will you securing this federal grant save Pennsylvania taxpayers money?
So the grant is not a federal grant. It's a private grant from the Howard Buffett Foundation.
It is.
And it's an enhancement, and it'll last for 5 years. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry. Also, last year we requested $1.7 million to fund the section, and we did not receive that full amount. So we are also trying to pay for the full staff that we have in the section. And the money from Howard Buffett is for other staff and also for wraparound services, other services, not lawyers, not agents, but people who will help victims.
Well, we appreciate, I certainly appreciate the work you do in human trafficking and additionally finding other revenue sources beyond Pennsylvania taxpayer money. So thank you very much for that.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Salisbury.
Good morning, and thank you for being here with us. We're here in the context of discussing the budget, but I'm more here to really ask you if you can help me with something. This is my third year on appropriations, and it's my third year being told that we still have wide-scale theft of SNAP benefits. And we've discussed it in the past as it may be some sort of an organized crime issue for people who may be watching at home and may not know what SNAP is. It's what we used to call food stamps. But I have a district that has a high level of poverty in parts of it, and I, every month, am contacted by people who've had their SNAP benefits stolen through card skimmers. And because we just have not the chip and pin system, but the magnetic stripe that gets swiped at point of sale. It makes it very easy for people to have those benefits stolen. We've had hundreds of those responses. I know that we do have a complaint line, but the feedback that I hear back is when people fill out the form, they don't really hear back. And also, of course, at the end of last year, the federal money to replenish people's SNAP benefits when they are stolen dried up and went away. So because my office staff and I are left trying to direct people to food banks and in some cases actually driving food to their homes so that they don't go without, can you please help us with the SNAP benefit theft?
I mean, this is an issue. I would love to meet with you and have this conversation in great detail and see where we can. I would love to. I mean, I think that when you talk about benefits theft, that is something that I can't really go into today, but what I can say is that oftentimes we see that on a large scale, where it's an organized organization that does that, and that often falls within our corrupt organization statutes. And so that's something that we certainly would have the ability if that type of case came to us. I also can work with local DAs to discuss the issues with them and maybe identify if there's any type of specific training their prosecutors need, because sometimes it's as simple as that. But what I can say very simply is I'd be more than happy to meet with you, to talk about this, and to identify any way in which I can help.
I think that when we talk about the state budget and we look at all of this money that we put into these different programs, if it's just being drained out and being sent to some criminal organization or someone who's hacked into the system, we really aren't helping Pennsylvanians with those tax dollars that we bring in from people and then respend. So I think it's really important that we're good custodians, certainly, of people's money. One of the things that I've seen is that people have just given up reporting the theft, because I received some screenshots today from someone who at 12:01 a.m., the day that their benefits hit, boom, immediately gone. So there's really not a lot of options on how to handle it from the user's side. I know that we do have an app, and sometimes they're suggested to change the PIN on that app and that sort of thing. But really, I think that we just have to kind of nip it in the bud by going after these places. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about whether these vendors that have these point of sale systems even know that these skimmers are on there.
Now there have been a lot of instances where they didn't. And I know over the last, I'd say, year or two, the prevalency of the skimmers is so vast that now they have internal training with a lot of these companies. I mean, when I'm listening to this issue, I think there's a whole lot. I mean, I think there's a lot of different avenues that we can go down. I think the first one is, you know, what do we have to do to make sure companies know how to identify skimmers to begin with? Are they not doing that? They should be doing it, but why would they not be? I think number two then is, you know, what can we do to identify these specific instances? Because most of this stuff, they're organized crime. And I mean, it may not even be on a giant scale, but they are organized crime, and it falls within the corrupt organization statute that we have here in Pennsylvania that the Attorney General's office utilizes to get these groups. I mean, I think that what you're saying is very serious. And I could not agree more with the fact that we need to collaborate on this and see if we can identify ways to, you know, make these victims whole. And to your point, to make our Commonwealth whole with regard to this money that's coming through our budget. So what I can say very simply is this: I acknowledge the issue, and I would love to set up a meeting and sit down and go through it.
Thank you very much. I'm encouraged by that. It's just such a heartbreaking issue when people are literally going hungry, and there's these cascading effects because, of course, the vendors then don't see that money spent in their stores, and it puts a huge burden on our local food pantries because that's their last resort of finding somewhere to go. So thank you very much.
Especially healthy food as well.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Thanks, the gentlelady. Representative Kutz.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, General. Thank you so much for being with us today. I want to talk about one of the biggest human rights issues of our time, and one of the biggest things that we need to do better of as a community, as a legislature, and working together, and that's human trafficking. And we've heard a little bit about that this morning. I've been active in my first term to help combat human trafficking, particularly in the mid-state, where you and I are both not from too far down the road. And General, as you've seen on I-83, and I see it in the 87th District, which I represent in Cumberland County, 15, the Turnpike, 81, 83, all meet in the Harrisburg area. This has been something that has been ongoing. There have been sting operations that have thwarted human trafficking efforts in Cumberland County, and that's something that I think we need to do more on. General, I'm curious, in terms of resources, what do you need to ensure that we can ramp up our efforts to combat human trafficking? In the past, I've spoken with members of your office who have said there were just 2 prosecutors assigned for the entire state for human trafficking related cases. I'm curious if you see a growing need for that to help stop this heinous industry from taking root in Pennsylvania, and what complement would you see necessary to be able to add to ensure that we're able to help victims and stop perpetrators and bring them to justice?
Right, so currently our complement, we have 1 chief deputy in that unit. In human trafficking, we have 1 assistant chief deputy, a senior attorney general, a deputy attorney general. So we have 4 attorneys, and it looks like we have 5 agents. And so what I can tell you is, even in a county, those individuals would be busy all day long with regard to these cases. A lot of these cases are complex, okay? It's a lot more than just that initial interaction with the victim. You have to do a lot of financial investigations. There's forensic accounting that's done to be able to identify where that money is typically being laundered to get the real bad guys. And so anytime we could have additional I would say, and I would want to talk to my staff first and make sure I understand exactly because it's not always lawyers. A lot of times it's an agent or 2 agents, or it's an analyst, some type of analyst. And so I would want to talk to them first before I say that, but I want to use this question as an opportunity to answer it in another way as well. All throughout Pennsylvania, district attorneys' offices are woefully understaffed. Woefully understaffed. And it is a tremendous issue. And it's not just DA's offices, it's children, youth, and family workers. It's a lot of your people that do the basic public service needs in our communities, okay? And when we look at the Attorney General's office, for example, one of the ways, so let's say we had additional positions, we have to be in a position where we can pay them appropriately. And one of the challenges that happens, for example, is that the Attorney General's office attorneys make on average between $10,000 to $15,000 less than the attorneys that work at the governor's office for general counsel. And I'm just bringing this up, and everybody's probably staring at me, they can't believe I'm bringing this up, but I'm bringing it up because that's a huge issue in today's world. And when we have such finite amount of potential prosecutors to do things like human trafficking, if we're coming to the table already way behind, then it becomes unbelievably difficult for us to identify, hire, and retain top talent.
General, I appreciate you bringing up that issue. I think it's important to note, and thank you to your team of prosecutors, agents, analysts who are on the ground every day fighting these atrocities. I think we need to make sure that you have the resources that you need to be able to go carry out those prosecutions. So to the extent we can work together on it, I would certainly welcome a conversation to ensure that we can put an end to this awful, awful industry in Pennsylvania. Let me ask as a follow-up, are there statutory changes that you feel would be beneficial by either changing the crimes code, adding new offenses that would help protect victims and would help make sure that perpetrators are more easily brought to justice at the state level? When we know county district attorney offices are so woefully understaffed, as you mentioned, would providing a statutory change in the state be helpful?
Very simply, I would love to sit down with you and have that conversation. I'd sit down with anyone that wants to have this conversation. One of the areas that we have to identify, and I don't want to go what a specific bill would look like, but we need more authority and tools to get the individuals that are paying for this. The people that are paying for the existence of this market are the ones who we need to go after, because they're the ones that keep it going. They're funding it, they're creating the logistics. And so what I would like to do is talk to my team about it, Rep. Kutz, and we can reach back out to you.
General, I appreciate that and look forward to the continued conversation. Chairman, thank you for the time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Curry.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello. Thank you for being here today. First, I do also want to thank Jim and the team I think Margarita's in the back. Hey, shout out. Just about working so deeply on the Crozier issue that we're struggling with right now, day by day in our community. I'm a Delco girl, and I represent the 164th Legislative District, where one of our hospitals unfortunately closed in our district, which has seriously impacted our community and continues to do so. And with that, I just want to talk a little bit about how hospital acquisitions, consolidations, and mergers have left our access to healthcare in Pennsylvania with a significant number of holes. This is especially true when it comes to our maternal and postpartum care. As the co-chair of the Black Maternal Health Caucus here in Pennsylvania, we narrowly focus on the numbers that are disparaging here in the Commonwealth of moms and folks who are having babies who not only sometimes don't leave the hospital themselves, or their babies die in a space where care is not accessed easily. Recently, hospital acquisitions have occurred by private equity ownership. These owners have, in 2 cases, bankrupted the hospitals and forced communities to make tough choices about keeping needed healthcare and services in place. What are your thoughts, AG Sunday, on private equity ownership of hospitals? I know you spoke earlier, and I know you said it is a priority of yours, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are on it. And when private owners agree to maintain services and infrastructure of the health services in our communities, do you agree that we should hold them accountable for that commitment? We don't want to see this happen again. This is a struggle. How will you, as the Attorney General, take a great role in addressing these issues? And how will you continue to work with us as legislators? Because just like the rep earlier talked about the SNAP benefits, these are things that we're dealing with our constituent service advisors every day. We have people calling our offices in great despair. So how do you plan to work on this with us and with our communities?
So to begin with, I want to again thank you for bringing this to my attention. I again, just to restate, understand how just unbelievably important this is. Without health care, where are we as a society? And there are people who desperately need it, again, from urban areas to rural Pennsylvania, where people have to drive hours to go see their OBGYN. It just depends on the circumstances. And so to your question specifically about private equity in healthcare, clearly that's something that we have to take a deep dive into and identify ways in which we can be proactive with being a part of those deals when they happen. I can tell you right now, based on my little over going on 5 weeks of being the Attorney General, I've spent many, many late nights researching this specific issue. There aren't many models that exist in the country that I could find where this actually works. In most instances, the private equity results in, 5 years later, maybe 10 years later, situations like this come where parts of a hospital are sold away, or there's a leaseback scenario that's in place. But at the end of the day, it's not providing the best health care for Pennsylvanians, which is the most important part of this. So very simply, I will do everything I can, and I would love to set up a meeting. I'm setting up meetings today. I'd love to set up a meeting with you.
That would be great.
And I'll come out. I would like to hear from the people that are affected by this.
Absolutely. And I want to say, in light of the month that we're in, February, Happy Black History Month, I want to say that because when we think about what's going on, I know we talk about rural areas, but when I talk about my district in particularly, there's Black and brown folks in that district who have no access. Now they have to wonder where they're going, transportation, and they're seeing disparaging results from the lack of health care. People are dying, AG, and we have to stop that in this Commonwealth.
And what I can tell you is that is absolutely unacceptable. Unacceptable. And I look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady. The chair grants access to Office of the Attorney General's photographer to do still photos for the next 20 minutes. Representative Alsumer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, General Sunday and team. Thank you for your service to the Commonwealth. General Sunday, the governor's proposed budget includes legalization of adult use cannabis beginning January 1st, 2026. General Sunday, do you believe the financial benefit, which the governor projects to be around $530 million for the general fund in fiscal year 25-26, and none of which is currently targeted towards the Office of Attorney General, outweighs the ramifications of legalizing recreational marijuana, as the drug is still considered a Schedule I narcotic under federal law?
So I'm going to answer that sort of in reverse. The first part is, I clearly am not an economist. And so when we look at what the projected revenue would be for that, that's not something that I would feel comfortable speaking to. What I can say is this. Laws in Pennsylvania and in this body, you all understand this better than most citizens, they're meant, it's not meant to make laws quick. Okay, it's not supposed to be easy to just make a law. And I say that solely through the lens of when I think about recreational marijuana, there has to be voices from everyone who potentially could be impacted by that, because once that's done, it's done. And so very simply, through the course of this process, I would like to be a voice for potential public safety risks, for potential risks with children. And I just want to make sure that there's a voice that's heard. And if at the end of the day, the legislature, in its wisdom, decides, we've listened to you, we've taken that into consideration, but we do think that there should be recreational marijuana, then clearly, like every other law in Pennsylvania, we would certainly abide by it and do what we had to enforce it. And so that's my position.
Thank you. As Chief Law Enforcement Officer, what impact would the legalization have on your office as well as the county and district attorney's offices?
Well, considering that the Attorney General's office goes after typically high-level and mid-level drug traffickers, I can't say that it would have an impact on a lot of the work that we do, because we focus on fentanyl, methamphetamines, cocaine, and things of that nature. Where I view it through the lens of is going back to my days as a district attorney. And the data is overwhelming that the highest likelihood of you or your family to either die or have serious bodily injury in some type of crime would be through being struck, and this is Pennsylvania-wide, being struck by an individual who is under the influence. And I, unfortunately, through my job, have seen some of the most horrific crashes, just unbelievable situations where, and most of these are people that aren't just on drinking, but they're also on drugs. Over half the DUIs in Pennsylvania are now drug DUIs, or drug and alcohol combined. And so very simply, I want to highlight that risk and just make sure people are cognizant of it as the legislature is processing everything else that goes into this and making that decision.
What would you anticipate the additional resources that would be needed for our district attorneys across the Commonwealth for that?
I mean, you would have to ask them about that. I mean, I think that obviously the data, and again, I haven't seen fresh data, and so I would like to, actually, I don't want to answer that, and solely because I want to look at, because there's a lot of reports that are coming out right now from around the country that are fresh, highlighting data that other people have seen. And so I would want to take a look at those reports and studies and see before I would want to make a guess there.
According to the governor's budget, adult use cannabis legislation plan also involves the immediate expungement of records of those incarcerated for only possession-related offense attributable to cannabis. Would this create additional cost for your current operations and related systems? And if so, do you have any estimates?
And I just want to understand your question. So are you saying would it be additional resources for the Attorney General's office?
Correct.
With regard to that, I mean, expungement would take place at the level of the district attorney, is typically where that would happen, because you would have to expunge it in the county courts. And so I think that was another question I would say for the local district attorneys.
Okay. All right. I see I'm on yellow. So one last, Mr. Chairman, could I ask one quick last question on this topic?
30 seconds.
You got it. Thank you, sir. Has your office had any discussions with counterparts of other states regarding their experiences involving legalization of adult use cannabis?
So up until this point, I have not. I know that when I was working with the National District Attorneys Association, because we're trying to identify the impact on people driving while under the influence. And so, but I haven't yet as Attorney General.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Khan.
Attorney General, great to meet you today, and I look forward to working with your office on hospital consolidation with Rep. Borowski, Rep. Curry as well. Over the last decade, we've seen a spike in hate crimes, hate crimes against LGBTQ+, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. And last session, I was really honored to join Chairman Harris, Representative Waxman, and a few other members on a nonprofit securities grant program to actually invest in, allow nonprofits like mosques, synagogues, community centers that may be at risk to hate crimes to increase security. Can you talk about what your office intends to do to help stem this increase in hate crimes against these vulnerable groups?
So to begin with, any crime by itself is bad, but when you add the element of hate, that takes it to a whole new level. I know that before I became the Attorney General, I actually worked with the AG's public outreach section on doing hate sort of trainings with the community. And so part one to this, I would say, would be doing everything we can to make sure that we educate police departments and district attorneys in particular on what legal options exist when a hate crime comes to them. That's really, really important because, many of the DAs across Pennsylvania are just fighting to get through the day dealing with 800 DUIs and those things that come. But I do think there's definitely a role. I'm on education and training still for the association. And so that's part one. I think we need to do that. The Attorney General's Civil Rights Division, which has Chair Corbett Anderson, who I've worked with over time as well. I think we need to make sure that he has the resources he needs because a lot of the times when these issues come to him, he may provide mediation, he may work with the individuals, he may reach out to an organization, and he really has had tremendous results from that side of it. I think that, as you know, probably in Pennsylvania, the hate crime statute criminally is a statute that's a rider on other crimes. And so, you have to have an aggravated assault, a murder. I prosecuted a case where it was a hate crime murder where we charged murder and also added the crime to it. And so I think that a lot of this comes down to is making sure that the district attorneys know they have a place to go. And this is something I'm going to go to town on this, getting out with the DA's offices and reminding them of the resources that the Attorney General's office has and letting them know that you have experts here that can help them do cases and making it so that that collaboration is even at a much higher place. I think, again, that we need to listen. I think that we need to understand, are there any other laws out there that could put us in a stronger position when there's a hate crime that occurs? I think that's, again, this is another area that I would love to be a part of having these conversations. So I appreciate the question. And if you have any follow-up from that, I'd be more than happy to continue talking about it. But right now, it comes down very simply, prosecute the cases you can prosecute, train other people to do the same thing, get out in the community and educate people as to what they have available to them in the event they feel that someone did commit a hate crime to them, or very simply, they feel like someone violated their constitutional rights.
Thank you. And I have to give a hat tip to Chair Dan Frankel from the Health Committee, who's been working on this hate crimes legislation for a while, and hopefully we can get that moved forward in this session as well. Last question is about workplace violence. As a nurse, I've seen the increase of our healthcare workers feeling unsafe in hospitals. Unfortunately, we just saw York Memorial Hospital, right in your community, where unfortunately a police officer, Duterte, was murdered. A nurse shot. A doctor was shot, and others really traumatized from that. And also, we're seeing, even on public transit, increase in violence against transit workers. That's something that I think we need to address here in this assembly, working on legislation to prevent that at the cause of it. So encouraging municipality or these transit agencies to actually have money that they could invest in preventing it, giving it to hospitals as well. Can you talk about the importance of the legislator moving to prevent these crimes from happening in communities where really they didn't really exist as much before, in hospitals, in mass transit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to start with, whenever a crime occurs, I used to say when a file comes to my desk, it's a lagging indicator of some societal problem, right? A lot of things happen before that crime occurs. And to that point, anything we can do to prevent it is unbelievably important, because, you know, when you think of a hospital, and I know you know this as a nurse, that's a place of healing. That's a place, I mean, my father has been in the hospital until a couple days ago. You know, it's a place where families go to heal. Magic happens in hospitals, amazing things do. And when you create a world where people are afraid to go to somewhere like a hospital because it might be viewed as like a soft target or something, then that's impacting access to care. And so, very simply, I think that anything that can be done to prevent these issues, and I think a lot of them go back to behavioral health, which is a whole nother conversation that I would like to have about behavioral health. A lot of these things that occur, like crimes of violence, if you forensically walk back in their life, you're going to find at some point they had a mental health crisis where they had an intersection with the criminal justice system, and nothing ever happened. And so I think that's a root cause that we can focus on that'll help down the road.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen. Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're doing a great job this morning in your first hearing. And my questions today are two different areas. One of them, I'd like to start out in the area of election integrity. Personally, we do a lot of work in election integrity space, but you know, this question is a little bit more personal, this scenario, because a personal friend, former colleague from across the aisle, I'm not a big Facebooker, but you know, he shared this example related to his daughter who passed away in 2020. And imagine his feeling and surprise when a voter registration shows up to his house on 10/28/24 that she is now a registered Republican. And last session we learned, you know, election integrity, serious issue, but in Pennsylvania, election fraud only has a statute of limitation of 2 years. So individuals who were identified as potential election fraud, would your office be supportive of revising in a bipartisan way that statute of limitations so that 5 years, you know, with some other felonies that we would, because it takes so long to dig through the effort, the intent to lock it all in 2 years just doesn't seem like it's enough time.
Yeah, I mean, 2 years is a very short statute of limitations. And I don't think there's any, I think that increasing that statute of limitations would really be benign generally. I don't see that being like a major issue, very simply. I think that when it comes to these investigations, you know, this actually ties into a concept called procedural justice. When people understand why individuals do what they do, they are more likely to accept outcomes. And when people file complaints about, I'll say facially valid complaints about election fraud issues, and if no one takes a look at them, then you're sending a message that, hey, we don't care. And that's one of the reasons why I think we got to where we're at generally. And so to that point, very simply, you know, I think that if it's facially valid, it should be investigated. And so if you want to increase the statute of limitations on that point, that's not something that I see would be an issue in any way.
Thank you. And I know within that tight time limit, I'd like to shift over and build on a theme. My colleague Representative Young, Barton, Kutz, DeVanzo, this issue of trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking. Yesterday, we had a number of discussions with Secretary Walker in the area of labor trafficking. And I agree with you. You had said earlier today, all of these efforts are connected across the board. Yes. We here, highly organized, particularly in the area of labor trafficking, where you said you have 14 labor trafficking cases, that it is almost more profitable to labor traffic and sex traffic because the penalties in Pennsylvania, they're so few, it's very difficult to get caught. The money that's being made is large. Can you touch on, it just seems like there's this Goliath and your office is a David trying to battle against it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and that's the reality of a lot of issues. And I think we're talking about human trafficking right now because it's something that's on everyone's mind. I think the increase of it has really caught people off guard. The prevalency of it that no one really understood or knew. I think that, when you talk about labor trafficking is a huge issue. It is a huge issue. Mm-hmm. It's huge for so many different reasons.
And if we can, and I agree with you, it is, but I'm not an attorney or a prosecutor, but federally, it's a $250,000 crime. In Pennsylvania, if it's trafficking of individuals, it's up to $25,000. Mm-hmm. Involuntary servitude, up to $25,000, and then unlawful conduct, $15,000. Yeah. What are your thoughts if we tried to take a different approach in this space because there is interagency? So whether it's a county level district attorney or the attorney general's office, that we would be able to recover attorney's fees and times to go back into that office, because even these fines don't come back to those efforts. They go to the Treasury, as I understand it. And I know there might be some people who would be cautious of that. But if we had guardrails, 18-month-long investigation, just hundreds and hundreds of man hours, and it's a 15 or a 25,000, could we restructure that in a way to better incent pursuit of these really bad actors?
I think there's a way to do that. I mean, I know that, for example, in human trafficking operations, when we forfeit funds, those funds can be utilized in furtherance of additional human trafficking cases. And so that's something that can be done. And so I think that you definitely have the ability, certainly, to do that. And I think there's a place for that. I think there's definitely a place for that. Someone else earlier mentioned the billions and billions and billions of dollars that is driving this entire issue. And the more we can do to attack the money, the better we will be and the stronger we'll be to protect the children in Pennsylvania. And I would be more than happy, again, to sit down and listen to you and talk to you about the statute and work through it.
Yeah, great. It's truly a bipartisan concern. So
absolutely.
I know my time is up. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Attorney.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Mays.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. Welcome, General Sunday and your entire team. Happy Black History Month to everyone. I want to talk about quite a few things. So my first question to you, General Sunday, for the benefit of the public's information, is it correct and fair to say hospitals are accountable to the Office of the Attorney General?
They are in certain circumstances. And what I mean by that is if it's a nonprofit hospital, then the Attorney General oversees nonprofits. If it's solely a private hospital, then there might be certain situations where that could occur. For example, if you have a private hospital purchasing a nonprofit, that could bring the Attorney General, that would bring the Attorney General to the table. If a private hospital, for whatever reason, if at some point the state is a creditor during a bankruptcy proceeding with a private hospital, we could be involved with that.
Thank you so much. So in addition to closures, mergers, mismanagement, I just want to state for the record, and I think you know this, but Black moms and birthing people and their babies are dying in hospitals across this Commonwealth. Black moms are 3 times more likely to die in our Commonwealth. Black infants, Black babies are 2.5 times more likely to die. So before co-founding the Pennsylvania Black Maternal Health Caucus with my colleagues, Rep. Curry and Rep. Cephas, I didn't know that a person, if they receive poor or substandard treatment in hospitals, inadequate treatment in hospitals, that they could file a complaint with your office. Could you talk about what that process would be? How would a person file a complaint? And generally, how do you plan to educate the Commonwealth, the public of the Commonwealth, about how they can file complaints when they experience this type of poor, substandard, or inadequate care at hospitals?
I appreciate that question very much. So to start with, we have a healthcare section in the office, and those complaints would go to the healthcare section. Just making sure. And so they go to the healthcare section. Within the healthcare section itself, oftentimes what they'll do is they'll work with, it could be everything from a billing dispute to a complaint about not receiving services, and that they will work with that individual and see if there's a way that they can help mediate it. They will also help educate the person that calls in and just really be there to walk them through it and see what they can do to assist. And to your point, like if people don't know about that, then what good is it? And so I'm getting great ideas this morning, by the way. And so to the chagrin of my staff, there's gonna be a lot of work to do. And so I don't mean that they like work, so they're fine with that.
Well, I'll just say that the Pennsylvania Black Maternal Health Caucus is full of great and brilliant ideas. So one more question for you, maybe 2 if I have time. So what's your vision for the office to combat these disturbing rates of Black maternal mortality and morbidity in hospitals?
So real quick, I want to say, just so you know for your constituents, it's attorneygeneral.gov is where someone could go to file a complaint. What I would like to do is this. I want to sit down and I want to understand the situation more so that we can identify what provides the greatest outcome. Because we can come up with ideas all day, but if it's not, something that's evidence-based that provides the greatest outcome, then what's the point? So I would love to sit down, and what I think we can do is identify, where this is happening, understand better why it's happening, and be in a position where we can be as helpful as humanly possible within the constraints of the law for the Attorney General. So I would love to set up a meeting and come out and speak with your entire caucus.
Well, we appreciate that, and we truly understand the urgency and the necessity of your office using its investigative powers to save moms and all babies across this Commonwealth, because maternal deaths in our Commonwealth, 93% of them are preventable. So why aren't we preventing them is the question that I asked and that we asked as the Pennsylvania Black Maternal Health Caucus. We will certainly invite you to our Black Maternal Health Week that will take place in Pittsburgh, April 14th through the 16th. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, General Sunday.
Thank you so much.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative DeVanzo.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, General Sunday. General Sunday, in looking at the materials your office submitted for this budget hearing, it appears to me that the governor's budget proposal, he is reducing the number of authorized positions in your office. In some cases, it appears that the authorized complement proposed by the governor is less than actually filled complements as of December 31st, 2024. As I believe in most cases, when your office submitted its budget materials to the governor's budget office last October, the amount was higher than the governor is proposing. While I realize you were not in office last October when the budget numbers were submitted, but you are here now. In response to one of my colleagues discussing about drug enforcement in the Commonwealth, you stated your office could absolutely use more agents. So my question to you, General Sunday, is this. Do you feel the Office of the Attorney General can effectively and efficiently operate under the current numbers of the positions that are filled, and can continue to do its job with the reduced number of authorized positions as proposed by the governor?
So I'm going to take those in reverse. And the first part I want to make sure is that we're accurate on the amount of unauthorized positions. Is there an issue with that? Okay. So I'm looking at a sheet here in front of me that was, and I just want to put on the record that our actual total complement is 1,103, and the filled as of the end of last year was 1,009. Just to put that out there, I just want to put that on the record. With regard to executing our duties, I want to talk about that because first of all, the Attorney General's office receives cases from the district attorneys. That number has gone up year after year after year to the point where I believe it's up 10% last year from the year before. DAs are woefully understaffed, and what we are finding in today's world, the complexity of a lot of these criminal cases is like nothing we've ever seen. When we're talking about human trafficking where people are getting paid with Bitcoin, when we're talking about the use of AI to create scenarios where children are getting, are becoming trafficked themselves or where they're becoming victims. I mean, it's so complex. And because of that, your local DAs a lot of times don't have the personal expertise, or just the knowledge to be able to handle some of these cases. So that all comes here, we're the backstop. And so the question becomes, what type of outcome does Pennsylvania want from the Attorney General's office? Do you want us to do everything humanly possible to make the community safe? If that's the case, then of course we're going to need more people. At the same time, if we receive more people, there has to be a commensurate increase in GGO. That's the only way that will be able to be sustainable. We are at a place now where the criminal element is changing. Like I said before, it's on the dark web, it's in social media, it's in places as we all age, like the young kids, I'll speak for myself, I'm turned 50 soon, but there's new apps that pop up every day. So to do the work that needs to be done, if we want to be even more effective, for example, if we want to increase our gang violence strike force, gang violence task force in Allegheny County, for example, increase it and do great work there, then we're going to need more people. If we want to take the gun violence task force and go to town up in Northeast Pennsylvania, where I believe there's a necessity as well, we're going to need more people for that. And so what I will say is that we're doing everything we can with the resources that we do have.
I appreciate your answer. Thank you. No more questions, Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Friel.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome, Attorney General Sunday. I appreciate you coming. It was nice to chat with you before our meeting today. And one of the things we talked about, and I'm going to bring it up here, is we were talking a little bit about mental health and the mental health crisis we're having and how it's related to intersection with the justice system. Specifically, we have mental health crisis that find its way into the justice system, into incarceration in Pennsylvania. So as the Attorney General, would you be, what is some of your ideas for expanding, and would you be for expanding mental health resources for folks incarcerated or coming out of incarceration? What do you see the role of the Attorney General here?
So I look at a couple things. Number one, there's a very, very successful initiative that came out of the Attorney General's office called the LETI Initiative, Law Enforcement Treatment Initiative, and that obviously is tied to substance abuse. There are a lot of times where we have counties that come up with these amazing ideas that have amazing outcomes. For example, when I was in New York, we have one with behavioral health. We have a behavioral health crisis in Pennsylvania. A lot of the crimes we see are tied directly back to behavioral health. We have severe trauma on children for a lot of different reasons right now that's impacting their behavioral health. Our prisons have become de facto warehouses for people with behavioral health issues. And so very simply, it's something we can't ignore. There are initiatives out there that you have public-private partnerships with hospitals, with the police, with members of the community, and they're localized. And these initiatives, they work. And that's something that the Attorney General could discuss with communities, could talk about how to do it, to explain to them, like, hey, this has been done here. It's a very real thing. People can get immediate outpatient treatment. It saves the hospital money. It saves taxpayers money. It keeps families together. It decreases crime. And so I think really through the bully pulpit that the Attorney General has, I think this is something that I know is very important to me. This is extremely important to me.
So you'd be in favor of expanding our resources for those mental health services and for the treatment of folks with severe mental health versus putting them through the justice system?
What you said.
Excellent. One other question, I'm going to change gears with you. We talked about consumer protection, a lot of things, and part of your role as Attorney General is consumer protection. We see the privatization of a lot of resources in Pennsylvania. We talked about it with hospitals. It's happening with municipal services like water, sewer, and programs like that. Can you just talk about the role of the Attorney General's office in terms of, as we see more privatization of what was once public works, and where those, how that impacts taxpayers? Because a lot of times we need an oversight for these transactions and for how it impacts taxpayers. What is the role that you see as the Attorney General to help protect consumers and Pennsylvania taxpayers?
I mean, very simply, we have a, we have our Public Protection Division. One of the main roles of the Attorney General's office is protecting consumers. We can utilize the federal antitrust laws that are available. We have, obviously, Pennsylvania is one of the only, I think we're the only state in the country that does not have an antitrust law in Pennsylvania. I think we are the only state, I believe, which limits our abilities under certain circumstances. It limits our ability with regard to the subpoena power. It makes our investigations, I will say, they may not be able to move as quick as they otherwise could if we did have a statute. And so that's an area that I think we're going to see more and more of, especially when we look at technology and things that are happening with technology. I mean, this office has been very active in this space. And so, I mean, from everything from, I know that there were with Google search engine to Amazon with regard to different things. And so that's a huge part of this office. And it's something that's very, very important to me. We have to protect consumers.
So am I hearing you correctly? You'd be looking forward to working with the legislator to put forward some type of antitrust or some type of to help you in enforcement of those consumer protections?
I'll be more than happy to have that conversation.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm finished my question.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Krupa.
Welcome, General Sunday, testifiers and staff. Thank you all for being here. With great power comes great responsibility. That phrase has been used in literature, philosophy, and pop culture, but it holds particular relevance to the role of the Attorney General. As the chief enforcement officer of our state, you have immense power. Power not just to prosecute wrongdoing, but to deter it. One of the most critical responsibilities of your office is ensuring that taxpayer dollars are protected from fraud, waste, and abuse. Public trust in government is directly tied to the assurance that officials, whether state, local, or legislative, are held accountable for misusing taxpayer-funded resources. Now, I'll take a minute and speak in hypotheticals. Let's say that a legislator has a state-funded staff, uses a state-funded staff or public resources for political campaigning, or a government official was to use a taxpayer-funded resource, such as a car or an airplane, for personal use. Or if you have an elected official or a government employee who's routinely filling up their family's vehicles with taxpayer-paid-for gasoline. These are all abuses that erode public confidence and demand strong enforcement. Given the broad authority to investigate, the broad authority your office has to investigate, I do have a few questions. How does your office prioritize cases of public corruption, and what steps do you take to ensure that political considerations do not interfere with these investigations?
Well, to begin with, we have a robust public corruption unit in the office. And so a lot of those cases will come from district attorneys. They may come to us because the DA may have a conflict for whatever reason. Maybe it's whatever that conflict is, they'll send it to us. Other times they'll just send it to us, and oftentimes, my understanding is that we'll take it. I take this very seriously. I know that in my own personal newly elected life, I've gone to great lengths to make sure that it is completely understood what the law is with regard to just the world that I live in and the things that I'm doing. I think that those cases have to be reported. I think they have to be investigated. And to your point about great responsibility, in America, we prosecute crimes, not people. And what I mean by that is we have to be very careful that we prosecute someone who committed a crime. We don't live in a world where it's acceptable to accuse someone of a crime and then say, whoops, my bad, because that doesn't fix it. And so I take that very, very serious as well. which is one of the reasons why the confidential nature of these investigations in the AG's office is so important. So to that point, very simply, if there are issues of public corruption that need to be investigated, then send them to the Attorney General's office.
Do you believe that prosecuting even small cases of abuse, quote unquote, such as a local official misusing government property, that this has a deterrent effect on larger scale corruption?
Well, I would have to see those cases on a case-by-case basis. I'm very hesitant. I learned this a long time ago as a district attorney to not engage in hypotheticals, because one little fact could just completely change the entire conversation. What I can say very simply, and I think this applies to all crimes, is if someone has a criminal intent, right? This is very important. So if someone makes a good faith error, that's not a crime. Humans make good faith errors all day long. If someone has a criminal intent to commit a crime, that's a different story. And if it's small, it should be prosecuted. If it's big, it should be prosecuted. And so that's something that we look into during the course of these investigations.
Do you have the necessary budget and staffing to effectively prosecute these types of crime, or do you see areas where additional resources are needed?
I think unless we're going to get some massive influx of them that I don't know about, I think we're probably in a good position right now to handle what comes across.
And I have so many questions, but two others that I hopefully have time to respond to.
No silly questions.
I want to give a shout out to Representative Salisbury for bringing up the issue of the SNAP fraud. And that is an issue in my district. And as amazing, as different as our districts are, we face a lot of similar issues. So I'm from Southern Fayette County, very poor, underprivileged area. That is also an issue in my area, and I'd appreciate being included in any of those conversations. And then finally, thank you so much for being a voice of caution on the marijuana discussion. And although I understand you can't comment in your role on the revenue that will be brought in, I think it is perfectly appropriate for you to comment on what it's going to cost, what it's going to mean in terms of dollars and manpower for both prosecuting officers and police across the Commonwealth. So thank you for that and your thoughtful response. Thank you all for testifying.
Thank the gentlelady.
Thank you.
Representative Siegel.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, General Sunday, for joining us here today, and my sincere congratulations on your new tenure and first month as Attorney General of Pennsylvania. I want to start with the issue of gun violence prevention and violence reduction. I think something very close to you as a former district attorney that you would know well. This legislature in the last 2 years has worked in a bipartisan fashion to make, I think, very sensible and smart investments in putting more officers on the street, but also very common sense violence reduction strategies. As a result, there's been a 42% drop in gun violence victims across the Commonwealth, a 38% reduction in gun homicides overall, 52% drop in gun violence in the city of Philadelphia, and a 30% reduction in Allegheny County. I'm a big proponent in the pulling levers model. I think you may have encountered or might be familiar with as a means. I think you would agree that the most effectual strategy for reducing gun violence is one that is collaborative, that brings together law enforcement, social services, and community partners, that promises both a certainty of punishment, but also pathways and resources to folks looking to escape a life of potential crime. Can you talk a little bit about that pulling levers model and perhaps how you as Attorney General can work with local district attorneys and police officers to bring that to reality?
Absolutely. So in my former life in York County, we had the Group Violence Initiative. That's, if anyone's ever read the book by David Kennedy, Don't Shoot, that's that model. We worked with David Kennedy. We built this out. It was data-driven. And we really were successful, but we didn't become truly successful until we had community buy-in. And so we were able to prosecute every case that came across. We identified typically the 2% in the community that were causing like 80% of the violent crime. We utilized an investigative grand jury. We did everything under the sun. We got them. We arrested them. We prosecuted them. We put them in jail. But what was not stopping the retaliatory shootings was because we did not understand the critical nature of having a local communicator, okay, that's from those actual areas, a credible messenger. And so we would hire people from other places, bring them in, didn't work. Once we found credible messengers in our community, everything changed. I mean, not only did it decrease gang violence, and in particular the retaliatory shootings, this is a model that should be available to any county that wants to look at it, where we have, this is how it works, this is how you do it, have people that go and help them to set it up if they want to provide that expert training, because there's a technical, very technical component to this as well. And so to that point, I'm so happy you brought this up because not only did it do the first order effects of decreasing crime, but there were second, third, fourth, fifth order effects of creating collaboration amongst different groups that never collaborated before, breaking down barriers to communication for law enforcement, increasing access to other resources that no one knew existed. You know, from our group violence model is where next things came out. For example, our START clinic, which is our behavioral health care model, came from that. From those same groups that were working together on that. Our opioid collaborative nonprofit, same groups that worked on that. I mean, I'm a prosecutor, and there are people that need to go to jail. But at the same time, if we really want to decrease community, like if we want to have a safer community, we have to put the right people in jail, but we have to stop people from committing more crimes, period. And so this is a really important topic. I would love to have this conversation. I talk to the DAs about it like every day to the point where like it's become ad nauseum to them, but I'm going to keep doing it.
I thank you for that answer, and I share the sentiment. I think we need to invest more resources in piloting those models around the Commonwealth. It's worked everywhere from Boston to Oakland, California, and West Baltimore.
And they hold people accountable. This is accountability.
They do.
I mean, this is, you know, the violent criminals get arrested and they go to jail.
Thank you, and I want to make sure I have the opportunity to ask this last question. Moving to the antitrust aspect of your office. Yes. We've talked a lot about the dangers of private equity in our healthcare sector. Yes. I had the opportunity to raise this issue last week with the Pennsylvania Fire Commissioner and the director of PEMA, and you might be well aware that in the fire truck manufacturing industry over the last several decades, there's been a considerable consolidation amongst fire truck manufacturers, so much so that the three largest industry consortiums now control 70 to 80% of the fire truck manufacturing market. It's led to considerable price shocks, longer timelines for delivery, and I'm interested in what you see your role in as Attorney General in working with other states' Attorney Generals to potentially bring antitrust legislation or antitrust lawsuits against those fire truck manufacturers to potentially break those markets up. I think we've moved from one of market competition to just pure market domination. It's affecting our taxpayers, and it's affecting our ability to protect and serve our taxpayers.
Well, what I can say is I'm happy you brought that to my attention. I'm going through the process now of really getting to know my colleagues all across the country and through the National Association of Attorney Generals. And this is something that I certainly will bring up in our next meeting and find out, hey, is anyone dealing with this? Is this an issue you have? I find that group to be a good conduit for communication in all types of levels. And then obviously internally we'll discuss it as well.
I appreciate it. And I have reached out to your office to start some of those preliminary conversations, so I look forward to collaborating with you on that.
Thank you so much.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Eckert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Attorney General Sunday, for being here. It's a pleasure to have you here in this role and have conversations today. So I'm going to come back to the Bureau of Consumer Protection because I think this is a crucial entity within your office that does, you know, from a constituent standpoint, we get a lot of calls when we're talking about the Attorney General's office. It usually is some type of consumer protection issue. In the past, I do believe, though, this bureau could be used in a way that maybe isn't helping consumers. So when we're talking about the Bureau of Consumer Protection, I think we're looking at bad actors, right? We're looking at folks really doing bad things. What do you see, while maintaining a pro-business standpoint, but also looking at the bad actors, what do you see your role of the Bureau of Consumer Protection as Attorney General?
So to start with the Bureau of Consumer Protection, from what I've experienced the most with the Bureau, and this was as a DA, now as an Attorney General, is the immense work that it does with regard to senior citizens. You know, in Pennsylvania, and I've experienced this through my own family. You know, Pennsylvania, I think we have the second highest amount of senior citizens in the country. Don't quote me on that. I think it's right around that area. And there's been a couple themes that have sort of permeated a lot of the discussions today. And one of them has been technology and AI. Well, AI is technology, but technology. And this is an area where that is just exploding. The advancements in technology with regard to the exploitation of senior citizens has moved faster than law enforcement. It's moved faster than people can even comprehend. And so because of that, our seniors who are aging with medical technology, some are living longer than they may have previously. They're on fixed income, a lot of them, and because of that, they are literally inundated with these scams from morning till night. It is relentless, and I think that we have an ethical duty as citizens to protect our seniors. I mean, I think that you can view a society on how they treat their seniors. And so to that point, when I think about the Bureau of Consumer Protection, I'm looking right here, and last year there were over 10,000 cases that were opened with regard to senior citizen complaints.
And I want to, easy plug here for your office. Jerry Mitchell from your office came to my district and did a great presentation on that exact issue. Extremely helpful, very valuable. I would recommend anybody to use your office to do that. But let me pivot now to the business side of this, right? Because obviously the Consumer Protection Department looks over businesses as well, and whether or not they're, fraudulent or deceptive. What do you see your role in that? Okay. I know we've had conversations in the past. You will take the cases as they come. You're not looking to go after certain industries. How do you see that role in that bureau dealing with our business community?
Here's what I can say. As I always go back to the fundamentals. What are our core competencies? What are the fundamentals? And here, the reality is, we take our cases as they come to us, and there are a lot of things that occur that aren't criminal. And I just want to make that clear. There are businesses that make good faith errors, and that's not criminal. There are people that make good faith errors, and that's not criminal. There has to be a certain mental state or a repetitive action to ultimately become criminal in nature. I think that the reality is simple, that this office has to treat everybody fairly. Everybody needs to be treated fairly with respect and dignity, regardless of whether you're a giant company or you're one individual and you are running your own business at home. And so I'm answering this in a broad way because I don't really have specifics to go off of here, but I think that we have to, like I said, treat everyone fairly. Like I said, in America, we prosecute crimes, not people. You don't pick someone and try to put crimes on them. That's not what this office will ever do, as long as I'm the AG. And so that's I don't even know if I answered your question, but I tried to.
No, I like the answer. So let me
I have no idea.
let me just follow up this way and saying, how do you see your role as the Attorney General in propping up business in Pennsylvania, and using this department? Obviously, we want to ferret out bad actors, but how do you see your role to help promote business in Pennsylvania?
Well, I would have to think more about that, to be honest. I think that promoting business is critical to public safety. A thriving economy is a tremendous indicator of an environment in which people can be safe. I think that it's critical to have that. It helped me when I was a kid working at UPS for 8 years. Having that job really changed my life. And so I think also, and on this point, I don't know if I think I'm still going. So another point I'm going to pivot off of this question, I apologize for that, is a huge issue that will assist with public safety also is reentry for people returning home from prison. I think when we have a thriving business community, when our office, which is our job, when we remove bad actors, that helps legitimate businesses to thrive. And when legitimate businesses can thrive, they can hopefully be in a position to hire people with a lot of different job skills that might be coming out of prison. So there was a lot in that answer, but I just felt that I should do it.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate it, Attorney General. That is also another something I really believe in as well, so I'm glad you brought it up. So thank you.
Sir. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Guzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, General Sunday, for your time this afternoon, and of course, team, for being here. General Sunday, I'd like to talk to you about an incident that happened just maybe a month ago with the senior in my neck of the woods in the city of Reading, and unfortunately, she fell victim to a cryptocurrency scam and lost about $800 worth of her money, and had a rough time figuring out how to pay rent that month. And so, according to the FBI's Internal Crime Complaint Center, in 2023, Americans lost $5.6 billion to cryptocurrency fraud. In Pennsylvania, we ranked 8th in complaints and 9th in total losses at over $124 million. Mr. General, can you tell us what steps your office is taking to assist Pennsylvanians, specifically older Pennsylvanians, from falling victim to cryptocurrency scams?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank you for asking me that question, because as I was preparing for today, I was studying cryptocurrency through certain scams that are happening, and I didn't think of it through the lens of seniors, okay? And so to that point, I think one of the things we're going to do, and this is easy, is, well, it's not easy, but build into our community outreach when we do senior scams presentations, built into it all about cryptocurrency. And so, for example, the issue, to your point, with cryptocurrency is, as you know, it's not regulated. There's no central regulatory body for cryptocurrency. And so I think that, to answer your question, I understand how serious it is. I would love to learn more about the impact on seniors. That's something that I would love to learn more about, and then speak with the attorneys in my office and see what tools could be available based on what is happening in the community right now.
So in that vein, of course, and we all know that there is no regulatory framework at the federal level, right. Is it your opinion that here in the Commonwealth, that Pennsylvania, that we should be introducing legislation to potentially regulate cryptocurrency markets and better protect consumers in the Commonwealth?
Well, I think, without, again, looking at specific statutes, I think this might actually tie into a potential state antitrust statute. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but also I think it's really consumer protection.
And so, to make sure that, because I let him go almost this entire 2 hours, First Deputy Attorney General sitting to my left, I'm going to ask him to see if he can answer this for us.
So, crypto is a big problem because I think it's very difficult to understand, and as we've noted, it's been unregulated. And any effort to, I think, regulate it would be appropriate, including whether to do it at the state level. It's difficult because a lot of it takes place on the internet. We only, the ability of the state to regulate stuff on the internet is very difficult because you just put in a web address and you go there. But I think any attempt to regulate crypto would be great. And I think, as Attorney General Sunday mentioned, adding crypto into the presentations that Representative Ecker mentioned, and I think several of the other members have mentioned, that we do regularly for seniors and others, is really important.
Yeah, and so this resident was led to a Bitcoin machine that's readily available at many local establishments across my district, deposited money and then sent this money to an individual that was not of Pennsylvania, but of course somewhere out in the internet, of course. So I know she's not alone, and there are many probably like her all across the Commonwealth that are losing their rent's money to these cryptocurrency scams. I'd like to pivot, though, because a lot of this also ties into corporate responsibility and data breaches. And I know you touched on this very briefly in terms of prosecuting crimes and not people. However, we've seen time and time again that there have been corporations that have regularly had their data breached. I could think of AT&T last year that breached over 103 million people across the United States personal information. And just in October, a website that does background checks information was leaked, and it was estimated that every single person in the United States information was leaked in the dark web. So I'd like to hear, Mr. General, do you believe that your office currently has the necessary tools and or enforcement requirements to go after companies that repeatedly allow consumer data to be compromised? And if not, what additional authority would you need from this General Assembly to do so?
So I'm going to start this answer, and I may turn it over to the side here. It depends. But to begin with, my understanding, again, based on preparing for today and without the benefit of the long history of serving in this office, is that Pennsylvania is known to be a leader in this area. That's something that I've heard previously. It's something that as I've been conducting my research, I know that we've recovered monies for citizens in Pennsylvania under these types of scenarios. That's something that I would have no problem doing. It's part of our job to do that. Do we need additional tools? I have no doubt that additional tools would be helpful. If your next question is what specific ones would you need, then I would turn that over to Jim.
Well, I would ask, would you support stronger penalties? Would you support increased fines? mandatory restitutions to affected consumers. How are we protecting Pennsylvanian residents when their data is consistently leaked on the dark web by these companies?
Yeah, I would support, I would want to look at the specific verbiage of the statute, and that's something, again, I would be more than happy to sit down one-on-one with you and walk through this entire issue. That's something, part of my learning as I go through this, and what's important to me is to not just have these interactions and go away. It's to sit down and thoughtfully collaborate and work through it. I can say right now that additional penalties, especially for corporations, would certainly be what's needed, because that's the only way that you can change behavior oftentimes with large companies. And so, but I would be more than happy to sit down, walk through this with you. I'm open to it, and I think it's important for Pennsylvanians.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Marcel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Attorney General Sunday, for joining us today. I had a couple quick questions. I'm going to try to get through them because I know I'm towards the end of the line here. Because I'm representing a part of Bucks County, there's a lot of conversation in my district about public safety and some of the things that are occurring in Philadelphia because we're so close. I recently found some statistics that were gathered by the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, and it reveals that there's a disparity that exists between Philadelphia and other counties in the Commonwealth when it comes to firearm violence. And so I wanted to just talk a little bit about some of those statistics. The commission noted that essentially the average assault by firearm in Philadelphia is 259 per 100,000 residents, and that the average robbery by firearm rate is 187 per 100,000 residents in Philadelphia, and that those rates are 4 times higher than the state average. And so I essentially wanted to ask you, because those rates are so much higher than other parts of the state, are there some things that your office can do to help restore a sense of order and justice in Philadelphia? Are there additional dollars or programs that you need? Is there something that our body can do to help ensure that we're working on this important issue for the Southeast?
So thank you for the question, and the answer is absolutely. Our gun violence task force has been a real game changer in the city of Philadelphia. So this task force started, I think, in 2007, and it's a collaboration between the Attorney General's office, the Philadelphia District Attorney's office, and the Philly PD. Through the use of investigative grand juries, through the use of all kinds of different investigative tools, we've been in a place where the outcomes have been tremendous. And so, for example, I have some numbers here. So, I just want to make sure I have last year's numbers here. So in 2024, there were 187 arrests. Oh, this is the number I'm looking for right here. Okay. So in 2024, the Attorney General's office had 187 arrests, 387 cases, and 591 illegal guns or crime guns were recovered. And so to that point, when you have a task force of specialized people where this is what they do all day long, it's a force multiplier. And so that task force not only has been just successful with those types of numbers, it's also the quality of the cases. And so a lot of the cases they're doing are cases that involve corrupt organizations. There's been homicides and things of that nature. So for us, at this point, I would say that anything we can do to make sure that the gun violence task force is robust is what is absolutely critical. And I mentioned earlier, we just started last year the gun violence task force in Pittsburgh as well. And we're already starting to see numbers come in from that. Magic happens when people work together, and that's the goal of the gun violence task force.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that information. I wanted to follow up really quickly to talk a little bit about mass transit. Act 40 of 2023 provided for a special prosecutor for mass transit in Philadelphia to institute criminal proceedings for violations of laws occurring within SEPTA. And so I wanted to just have you talk a little bit about just the way that funding is. I believe I was reading that essentially your office would be repaid by Philadelphia for some of these costs. And so I was wondering if you could confirm if that's been occurring, how much, like just give us some numbers essentially on that.
Sure. So a couple things I want to say about this, and I'm glad, I wasn't sure if this question would come up. I'm glad it did. So to begin with, I'm conducting a full assessment of that entire act and everything that's going on in the AG's office with regard to it. There's two things that are important to understand right now. Number one, that the act has been challenged constitutionally by the Philadelphia District Attorney. And so it's gone through the courts, and it's up now with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And so we are, at this point, everything is on pause until the Pennsylvania Supreme Court lets us know, is this constitutional, is it not constitutional? And I say that solely because if it's not constitutional, then I don't want to put this body in a position where I'm asking for funds for something that won't exist anymore as soon as that ruling comes out. Number two, up until this point, my understanding is that there has been no money received back from the city of Philadelphia up until this point. I know also that a report was put out in accordance with the statutory reporting requirements to the legislature, and I'm not sure specifically what committees that went to or if it went to the entire legislature, but that report is together, and we can make sure you get a copy of that if you'd like to go through it. And I think that would be very helpful for you just to really understand what has been happening and where we're at with regard to this.
Well, thank you so much. I know that I'm a little over time. I apologize, Mr. Chairman, but I would be interested in that report, and thank you for that very thorough answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Gentlelady. Chairman Struzzi, do you have any questions before we conclude?
With all due respect, Mr. Chairman, we have one more speaker that would like to ask some questions.
No.
I don't understand why.
Because with all due respect, Chairman, we are already over time. It was you and your executive director who complained to me earlier this week and last week about us continuously going over time. We have a 1 o'clock and we have a 3 o'clock today. If the 1 o'clock,
it was the time for lunch.
If the 1 o'clock gets pushed back, then that means we're with the Department of Ag later. If that gets pushed back, it then means we're with the judiciary later. We have 3 hearings today. I have been very fair. The gentlelady who just spoke went over her time. The gentleman who asked for 30 more seconds got more time. All of these things add up. It is after 12 o'clock. I am trying to keep on a time schedule like you asked me to.
I believe it was in reference to when we were coming back from lunch. But in the interest of cooperation, Mr. Chairman, I mean, we have had hearings. This is our 7th day of hearings, and most of them have gone over. I have nothing else to do. We can be here all evening. That's fine. But when a duly elected member of this General Assembly wants to ask a question on both sides, they should have the opportunity to do that.
Respectfully, Chairman, you literally just complained to me the other day about going overtime. It was your staff who asked us to keep in the time frame. I am doing what you asked me to do. And again, unlike the other days, we have a 3rd hearing with an equal branch of government that you now want me to ask to wait additional time where they are under no responsibility to do so. I am trying to keep time in order, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, but it's only a quarter
And we're
after 12.
wasting time now with this.
He could be speaking now.
He could, but it's your turn. Do you have any questions, Chairman, for the Attorney General?
I certainly do, but I know that Representative Kell would like to ask some questions. I don't understand why we're changing the rules mid-hearing.
We're not changing the rules, sir. The time was the time. I've asked some of my members to not ask questions because of the time. I am trying to be respectful as you asked me to. So again, Chairman, we can have this conversation offline. Do you have questions for the Attorney General? If not, we can proceed.
Chairman Kell, or Representative Kell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that means that you're going to have him ask questions and you won't ask questions. Is that what you're saying?
Mr. Chairman, I really think this is not in the interest of fairness.
Thank you. This hearing of the House Appropriations Committee is now concluded unless the chairman has questions.
This is not
It's
how we're
one-on-one
supposed to do things, Mr. Chairman. You know, we tried to establish mutual respect coming into this. And clearly,
Chairman, I'm going to ask you again, do you have questions? If you would like Representative Kale to take your time, that is fine.
I will allow Representative Kale to take my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Kale, you may conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman Struzzi, for allowing me to speak here today. Attorney General Sunday, thank you for being here today. I think you've done a fantastic job. I'm very happy to see you sitting there. I'm looking forward to seeing the good work that you are going to be doing. And I don't think we can understate how important the job is that you have. The Office of Attorney General and Prosecutor in general has a very understated, I think, in society, understated position. It is indeed one of the most, if not the most powerful position that we have, whether it's in a commonwealth, in a county, or within the United States. And unfortunately, over the course of the last number of years, we have seen many individuals abuse this power, using the power to go after political opponents. We saw it with President Trump, with an attorney general in New York. We saw it with DAs in New York City. We saw it with DAs in the city of Atlanta. And I want to ask you here today, will you commit to us, to this General Assembly, that you will not abuse your position and go after political opponents?
I will never use this position to go after political opponents, unless, of course, if they committed a crime. I just have to put a caveat to that. But the reality is, you cannot, and I've said this 100 times, we do not prosecute people, we prosecute crimes. And that's the way that I handled myself as a district attorney. It's the way I'll handle myself as Attorney General. You cannot use the criminal justice system to advance political, advance, I'll say, your political ideals or things of that nature. You can't do it. It can't ever happen. It's not something I would ever do, nor would I tolerate, and I will not do it as Attorney General.
I appreciate that answer. Another problem that we've had in the United States, and unfortunately within this Commonwealth, is prosecutors refusing to enforce laws that are on the books. And as a legislator in particular, this is very frustrating. We pass a law, and then there's a district attorney that refuses to actually enforce the law. And my question to you here today is, will you enforce the laws that are on the books?
Yeah, absolutely. And I made that clear during the course of my campaign. I've already done that in the first 4 and 5-ish weeks I've been here. The Attorney General is the attorney for the laws of our land, essentially. When you pass a law, the Attorney General fights for your law. If your law is passed and is signed into law by the governor, it's deemed to be constitutional. And we fight for the constitutionality of every statute, and that's by law. And so to that point, my job is to fight for laws. It's to fight for their constitutionality. That is by statute. Regardless of if I agree with the law or I don't agree with the law or I'm indifferent about the law, that's not part of the discussion or the equation when we're analyzing the way we do our job. And I take that very seriously. And so, I appreciate you asking that question, and it's an important part of this job, because if we didn't do that, if we picked and choose which laws we would defend, then there would be no way for the citizens to ever understand what's expected of them. No one would understand what the rules of the game were. And so this is a job where we have to focus on our core competencies and defend the laws of Pennsylvania.
Thank you for that answer. And all of this politics have gotten mixed up into law enforcement, unfortunately, over the course of the last number of years in different places around the country. I think clouds the good work that attorney general's offices and district attorneys ought to be doing around the United States and around the Commonwealth. My question to you, what do you believe are the top priorities for the citizens of Pennsylvania as far as law enforcement goes, and what should you and what are you going to be focused on solving the problems that you'll be solving in the Commonwealth?
I think to start with, very simply, I mean, communities have to be safe. And when we talk about the internet, I'll talk about it again, we have to do everything we can to fight right now, to identify ways to fight for children because of social media, because of the internet, because of technology. Our children, people try to victimize children in this country literally every single day. And the technology is moving faster than any normal parent could ever keep up with. I mean, you have parents who are just trying to do their job and be good parents. They can't keep up with what's going on in social media. So we have to do what we can there. We have to fight and protect seniors. That is unbelievably important. We have to do everything we can to remove fentanyl and other illegal drugs from our streets. We have to go after organized crime that are having activities that result in crimes of violence and things of that nature. We have to go after organized financial crime. Very simply, we have to enforce the rule of law, period. And so that's what I'm going to focus on.
Thank you for those answers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Attorney General Sunday, for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Being flexible with your time. We are going to break and come back at 1 o'clock sharp so that we can do Department of Ag, remembering that after Department of Ag at 3 o'clock, we have the judiciary this afternoon. Again, thank you to our Attorney General for being here and answering the questions. And with that, this appropriation hearing is concluded.